a question I kept grappling with is, how did I get through this? How am I sustained? And what can I impart to you all as wisdom to how you can utilize these concepts and tools in your life? So I was thinking about a talk and concepts and slides, and I just kind of threw all that off my table and said, rather than talk about it, I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to show you where my resilience comes from. And the only way I know to do that is by introducing you to some of my Eskenazi family. And so tonight, the plan is I'm going to put a scenario in the chat right now that's a very real scenario that's going to frame our discussion. And then we're going to hear from the team, and we're going to hear about their feelings, what they learned about themselves, and how they were resilient through this. This discussion, I'm hoping for candidness. I'm hoping that if emotions come out, that we just let them come out. And it's important in our healing together as a team that everybody knows this is a safe space, and we're all here for one another. And I think it's going to make this really special. It's less of me talking and more of my crew, and I'll try to do my best to facilitate the discussion. So take a deep breath in as I do, and let's go to April 6, 2020. Picture this scene with me, if you would. 70 ICU patients. This is in an ICU that only has 48 beds, so patients are all over the place. 66 on ventilators. We're conserving PPE by hanging gowns on hooks in hallways because we have to reuse them because we don't have enough and we're running out. We're placing our precious N95 masks, which are used to protect us from aerosols, from infectious diseases like tuberculosis and COVID. We're putting them in lunch bags and saving them for reuse at a later date after they've had time to self-decontaminate. Meetings are taking place with Dr. Smith and Dr. Fettig and others on what to do when we run out of ventilators. How are we going to decide who gets a ventilator? We are taking care of patients by day and frightful by night about difficult decisions that may be coming our way. We're out of dialysis machines, and we go home worried about hugging our families, turn on the news to see images of body bags and trailers parked outside hospitals in New York City. No visitors in the hospital, so we feel alone without the families of our patients. Most of the consultants are doing just kind of telemedicine consult over the chart and then giving the feedback to the primary team, the critical care team, and the nurses and therapy teams and the palliative care teams that are all there. In the midst of this scene, code blue is called, room 6415. A patient you happen to know. She's been there for a few days, 45-year-old Hispanic female. And this is the third time you've run to that room today for a cardiac arrest. As soon as the code went off, you knew it was going to be her. CPR is in progress. Everybody scrambles again to find their hook on the hallway to grab their gown and get their N95 on. In the midst of all of this, because it's the third call, Dr. Willard and Dr. Fettig and the palliative care team have her two daughters on the phone via FaceTime or whatever medium it was, who are watching and talking to them as the CPR goes on in the background, asking to be with their mom, pleading for the team not to stop. And this is the scene you can imagine watching unfold before your eyes. It's a very real scene, and all of my guests who are here with us tonight, I hope will have time to speak and share. I want you to see what they saw and feel what they felt. And through that process, understand how they've adapted, how they've struggled, because we need to normalize all of that in order to take the next steps forward. So with that as a preview of the heavy stuff that is to come, let's go first to my team, who are the first ones who are jumping on that chest, who are at the bedside for 12-hour shifts, taking care of these patients one by one. So far, I see Amanda and Kara. And so as you guys come up to speak for the first time, if you would just start with a one-liner of who you are how long maybe you've been a nurse or a physician, if that made the case, if you're a resident, that you're a resident. And the first question I want to go around with our panel tonight and ask is, as this patient is coding and this scene is unfolding, what are you feeling? So Kara and Amanda, please take it away.
Amanda, do you want to go first or do you want me to go?
You can go, it's okay.
Okay, my name is Kara. I've been a critical care nurse for about 5 years now. And as Dr. Carlos described, that scene feels very hopeless. It feels very helpless in that situation. Like he said, you know, we're the first people on the chest typically as the team comes running and scrambling to get all their PPE on. And it just feels hopeless. You know, you're doing everything you can for the patient and it's not working. And you have family there who can't be there in person, which feels not normal. You know, normally we have family there at the bedside. And so everything is just not as it should be. So, you know, you're fighting for these patients and it's just not working. You know, I have so many pictures in my head of standing by these patients' side, holding their hands as in place of their family, since their family can't be there as they pass away. And it's just humbling. It's a very humbling experience. It's heartbreaking and it doesn't get easier. So yeah, showing up to work where there's gowns lining the hallways, it feels like it's kind of like a movie scene. You feel like you're living a little bit in a nightmare with just so much anxiety from all of the staff. It's hard. It was definitely very difficult. But the one thing that I really depended on in those moments were just your team members. You know, you can't do it alone. You have a whole team, a whole crew there of doctors and respiratory therapists and nurses and everyone fighting as hard as they can for these patients. So yeah, it's tough.
Amanda?
My name is Amanda, and I'm the charge nurse at Eskenazi, and I've been there for 14 years now. I was struggling with what to say with this because even just thinking about it, a lot of times it brings up stuff you don't want to think about again. There's all the names and faces that still parade through your mind of people that you just felt like you couldn't do your best for because we were working so many. Those that couldn't be there with their loved ones, as Kara said, when we took them off ventilators and as they passed, and then we just shut the videos down. That was really hard. It's hard too because you kind of have to separate yourself a little bit in those scenes. You have to think, okay, what are we going to do for this patient? Is there something else that we can do? What haven't we given? And then at some point, you have to start asking the questions like, is it up? And hard. And then because all these patients are so sick, you don't feel like you can dedicate the time that you would have normally to these families, to the patient's aftercare, because you're going to deal with another patient that's not doing well. And as Kara said, it was really a team effort on all ends, from physicians to therapy to nursing. There wasn't any one discipline, I don't think, that didn't have a critical role in helping. We had a lot of mix of intensive care unit nurses from all over other areas of the hospital that were pitching in. You know, we had to rely on each other and we had to just do the best that we could. And there were days it just didn't feel good enough. And a lot of us went home crying, a lot of men crying. But I think it was better knowing that we had the team around us. And it was better knowing that we weren't alone in this situation. And for me, my personal faith played a huge role in how I was able to cope during this. I've always felt that God has given me the skills and the abilities that I have, and that I need to use them. So when they were asking for extra help, a lot of us came in extra shifts. It wasn't because I felt I needed to, it was because I wanted to, because these patients, these families needed someone there that could have someone there for them. And it's just an honor to be able to do that too.
The words I heard were heartbreaking, devastating, and the guilt that comes with having so many patients that you feel like you can't give your all to everyone in a time when they all needed your all. We're going to come back to you guys again to hear more about kind of your post-recovery and build on some of those things you were talking about too, Amanda. So the CPR is going on, and Kara and Amanda are sweating and documenting and grabbing medications. And in the midst of all the chaos, Jana, our respiratory therapist, is at the head of the bed with a bag valve mask and making sure that she's ventilating this patient and getting the oxygen in. Jana, as a respiratory therapist, you probably never dreamed after school that you would be caring for this many patients in the midst of a pandemic. As you think about this scene in this moment, what are you feeling?
Terrified, in a word. This was pretty early in the pandemic. We didn't really have a lot of our own information. So every single time it was terrifying. I felt like we were still kind of trying to drink water from a fire hose on the daily, in terms of just how quickly the information was changing and the protocols that we were trying to put into place for safety. And knowing that every time I walked into a patient room, what I was going to do likely could expose everyone in the room to this virus. And just trying to remember the steps I needed to take to protect not only the patient, but all of us.
Terrifying. That's a big word. Terrifying that we're going to provide the wrong care, and terrified that we're not going to be able to provide enough care.
Yeah.
Moving on, our first responders from the medicine side are often our residents, and we have Dr. Frick and Dr. K. I want to come to next with the question, what are you feeling in a scene like this? So guys, if you would just give us a brief introduction with who you are and what type of resident, and then dive into your feeling in this scene.
Hi everyone, my name is Willie. I'm a third year internal medicine resident, and I'm currently looking for hospitalist jobs next year. So if you know any leads, let me know. But I rotated through the MICU a number of times during the last COVID season, and I think one of the main reasons that it was such a wonderful growth experience for me was because of the team. I think you can see clearly that everyone in the MICU really looks to one another for support. And so that is why it is so bearable for me in part. I know for me, I'm someone who is pretty quick to emotion. I cry easily, often with patients, with colleagues. Tears flow easily for me, and I don't shy away from that. And I think that it's a big part of why I feel motivated to keep going, because I do feel a lot of human connection to my patients. And while I think some people might, try to tell you not to get too emotional, lest it, cloud your judgment. I think for me, a good rule of thumb is not to be more emotional than the patient or the family. But if I'm reacting and crying with them as their family member is dying, I think that's a pretty normal thing to do. And for me, it really enriches the work. But more than anything else, it's being surrounded by nurses, RTs, other residents, staff, fellows who are going through all the exact same things with me. And I can look to them and we can kind of hug each other at the end of it and say, we're doing our best here.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam. I am also a third year internal medicine resident. I am actually going to be doing my geriatric fellowship at IU next year. Very excited. So when you walk into situations like this, I think the thing that comes to your mind, like at least mine, is frustration, right? We're taught all through medical school, all through residency, that our job as a doctor, as a healer, that we're supposed to be able to fix things and help people. But at a certain point, you learn that you can't fix everything. And that's really, really hard. Like the first patient loss you have is really hard. And this is really hard too in this situation, because the patient is in their 40s. Teenage daughters are on this Zoom call. That's so, so hard, because it's hard too to not put yourself in the family shoes at that point and say like, oh my gosh, this is my mom in this bed. You know, it's not too far off the age of some parents. And it's, you know, it's very disheartening, kind of a theme that we have heard throughout this. And, you know, I think at that point you have to realize that what your role is now is to best support everyone around you and use the team to do that. And, you know, I think this theme of the team being there is going to come up over and over again tonight, because we're a family. When you're in the ICU together, you see things that you will, the hardest things in life, you'll go through some of the hardest moments in your entire life. And the people you lean on are the people around you. And we've worked all of these people together, you know, and just realizing that there's still things that you can do, and that you kind of had to transition your thought process and realize that you're still providing really good care. It's just a different type of care. And that's something that I definitely learned.
So we've heard terrifying, we've heard devastation, frustration, another emotion that comes with not being able to fulfill our calling and our duty. And that's another big word that we're going to hear more about coming up. So the residents have arrived. They are whipping out their kind of code blue ACLS guidebooks, making sure they're following the proper steps, terrified that they might get the call wrong about when to give epinephrine or miss a potential problem like a pneumothorax, terrified in the moment that those quick decisions that need to be made are going to be forgotten about given the high cortisol levels and stress of the situation. And then Dr. Suazo arrives, the pulmonary critical care fellow who's weathered several storms and has been through a lot of code blues in critical care training. Dr. Suazo, when you think back around this time in early April and the patients and the care, what you were seeing and doing, what emotions were going through your heart and mind? And I especially want to make sure, if you would, tell the story about your family.
Yeah, I think to kind of touch along that same point, so I'm one of the second year ICU fellows, for those of you that haven't met me. So right around that same time, actually, probably just prior to that, actually, my grandfather had actually passed away from COVID. So it was already kind of hitting home more so than in some other, I guess, people's circumstances, maybe just because it, you know, once it touches you, then everything kind of becomes a little bit more real. So, you know, I think the first thing that I thought of, I guess, when we were sharing this scenario, and by the way, I feel like I'm in an episode of The Good Doctor. You just kind of imagine this scenario and it's perfect. I just, even though it's been a year since all this happened, I still remember all the M&M colored gowns hanging all along the walls. And, you know, every day was a little different color gown, some green, some yellow, some red. It was very vivid. But I think the first thing that kind of pops into mind for me was just an enormous sense of guilt, and kind of twofold. And, you know, the first thing that I thought of was guilt for the patient, because you want to bring her back. She's got 2 kids, you know, she has a reason to live. She's young, and you're hopeful that you can try to get her back. But the second part of it is guilt that, you know, we're kind of going into a futile situation. You know, by the time a patient's coding for the 3rd time in a day, then you start thinking, you know, are we causing more harm? Are we, you know, creating more pain and suffering than benefit? That's kind of the first thing you think of as a physician is do no harm. And, you know, once you start getting into that point where you're possibly creating more suffering, then you start having guilt on your own conscience. You know, should we be doing this for the patient? But it makes it that much more difficult when families can't be there seeing kind of what we're putting them through as well. So I think the guilt for me was twofold. One, it hit home, you know, with everything going on in my personal life. And then 2, you feel terrible for the family members that can't be there. They want you to do everything. You want to do everything, but are we creating more suffering and pain by putting them through all this? So it's a lot of emotions kind of all at once. And, you know, as Willie was kind of saying, a lot of us kind of wear our heart on our sleeves when these patients are our age. You know, they could be your own family members, and we've seen that happen. So easier said than done, but it's I'm so glad to have these guys all here with us, and it's been an incredible year working alongside with all you guys. So much appreciated.
So guilt, that's another what I would call a cut word. That's a word that cuts to the core of all of us. No matter how thick your skin, guilt is one that gets into the insides and can tear you up. Part of the team involves the people that after we go home respond to all this after dark, the ICU after dark. And our representative tonight is Alni Gadberry, our Eskenazi nurse practitioner who cares for patients like this and others when all the mayhem of the day has left. And so, Alni, thank you so much for joining us. If you could just introduce yourself. And the first question for you is, what were you going through around April 6, 2020?
I'm Alni. Like Dr. Carlos said, I am a ICU nurse practitioner. It was overwhelming for us. It was mostly just myself and one of our other nurse practitioners at night because most of our team was off on maternity leave. So I feel like we were just working all the time, nonstop. And then us coming to the ICU was a rather new job as well. So this happened almost 6 months, a year after everybody started joining. So it was mostly overwhelming, and every other feeling that everybody else has said. It was scary, frustrating, especially overnight when it is just us and a resident. We don't have any senior house staff. Luckily, having the great team that we had, everybody stepped in. We either had a staff attending or one of our fellows help us overnight. So that was probably the best thing that happened for us in peace, because overwhelming is the biggest emotion that I can think of when early on.
Overwhelming is a big word because overwhelming is out of control. Overwhelming is a tidal wave. It's overwhelming you, and that leads to terrifying, and it leads to frustration. During the day, we typically have ICU pharmacists that are rounding with us as a team, and they're helping us make sure we get our medication dosing right and checking our levels. And during the pandemic, gosh, 1 week was hydroxychloroquine, the next week it was not hydroxychloroquine, then it was remdesivir, then it's ivermectin, then it's, pick it. And so Jesse Witten is our ICU pharmacist. So Jesse, you were through a ton of this, the emotional and the mental. What were you feeling around April 6, 2020?
Yeah, so I'm Jessie. As Graham said, I'm one of the MICU clinical pharmacists. I've been in my role for almost 10 years. So I've been doing this for quite a while, and definitely COVID was not like anything that I had ever experienced. Anyone else here? I started my career kind of during H1N1, and it was kind of laughable. Like, people would say, oh, well, it's just like the flu. Like, no, I've been through one of the worst pandemic flu seasons, and it's nothing like this. Interestingly, when I think about this, I have a different perspective, but similar emotions. So my biggest thing, thinking about April 6 was I was super guilty. So we were asked as clinical pharmacists to minimize the people in the hospital. We were asked to work a bunch offsite. So we had, I'm looking at the chat too, so I'm laughing at that. We had somebody, our ED pharmacist was always there during the week for emergencies, but we were all rounding remotely. And when a code blue was called, I think I remember probably this day, I felt like, wow, I'm normally there. I'm normally the one passing out the medications. I work the closest with the ICU nurses and the fellows and everyone running the code. So I'm the best suited person to be there, but I wasn't. And I don't know if this is a healthy way to deal with it, but I dealt with it by working a ton. So I was trying to do everything for everyone. If there was weekend shifts, I was the first to pick them up. As Graham said, new therapeutics are coming out all the time. So I was trying to figure out what do we need to use? We were running short on everything, trying to figure out a plan so that we didn't run out of sedatives. And I really just threw myself into trying to work as much as I could and be helpful in whatever way I can, whether I'm remote or there. But normally I'm a big, like, love the team. I rely on everyone around me. I love my job because I'm with and working with so many awesome people every day. And so being at home, that was super rough as well. So that's kind of my biggest memories from that time.
So detached from one of your greatest sources of encouragement and motivation, and trying to chip in. There's this thing that's been described, just kind of the guilt of all of our specialists who weren't home crit ventilator trained, our gastroenterologists and others that wanted to help and then felt guilty because they couldn't be in the hospital. It wasn't anything of their doing. And that was very real for many people. Holding the phone and having these discussions where doctors like Dr. Fettig and I think Dr. Willard was able to join us. Claire, if you're here, we'd start with you for what emotions and things you were processing through. If you could introduce yourself and let us know if you're here.
I'm here.
Oh, great. There you are. Hi, Claire.
Hey. Hi, everybody. I'm one of the palliative care physicians here at Eskenazi. Like Graham, I'm a Notre Dame grad, so I got to throw that out there too. But been here for about 5 years now and really lucky to work alongside the ICU team pre-COVID, post-COVID, hopefully. It's funny, Graham, even knowing that you were going to describe that day, I was still kind of a gut punch to hear it again. And I think one of the biggest emotions, kind of pervasive through that whole spring was just feeling helpless, particularly for, the case of a 45-year-old woman and her teenage daughters, helpless to make sense of why this was happening to her. And the other thing I think that I struggled with a lot was, being one of our palliative care physicians here, we usually have a single team, and like you and the ICU folks, we ramped up to 3 different teams, and usually have a smattering of ICU patients that can't talk to me, and instead had an entire team of ICU patients that I couldn't talk to. I couldn't sit with their families and hear about them. Which is kind of the bread and butter of what we do with palliative care is kind of literally and figuratively putting our arms around families. And then I think the other thing that was really difficult was separating one patient from the next. It was the same story over and over and over again, and being able to talk to their families, hear their stories was the way that we really sort of, I think, clung to this is an individual, and wanting to preserve that. I remember, trying to get pictures from families and emails so that we could print them out and put them in their rooms. And Lyle can speak more to some of the efforts to capture the stories too, but I think that was helpful. I know for myself, I think for our team, and I hope for those that were helping take care of these patients too, to have that connection that could have gotten lost in all the chaos.
Helplessness and the inability to do your job as you would normally do your job. All those key things of having family members there to be with you. Now it's over the phone. And in this case, it was through a Spanish interpreter, which was also really hard. And they were as very much as frontline as the rest of us in these cases. Next up, we're going to go not to necessarily a different level of stress, but maybe a different type of stress. And I want to come to Dr. Fettig and Dr. Smith. So these 2 physicians, in addition to doing the daily care, are taking it a step back and looking at the big picture, thinking about the staff, thinking about the triage plan, thinking about how we're going to take care of 80 patients, 90 patients, thinking about the safety of their staff, bringing things home to their family, just an enormous level of stress on top of everything else. So I'll start with you, Dr. Smith, and then come to you, Lyle. Joe, if you would just introduce yourself and take yourself back to April 6th. What are you feeling? What's it like to be you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Graham. Yeah, so I'm Joe Smith. I'm a IU med school grad, did IU internal medicine residency, chief at Wishard, IU pulmonary critical care, was a VA doc for a little while now, section chief of pulmonary critical care at Eskenazi and the MICU director. I mean, I went through phases. I think all of us did. I'll share a few of those. I could share all night, but I think the first thing you should know about me is when there's something in front of me to do, I dig in. I just start doing it. And when this all rolled around and we saw it coming at us, Lyle and I can remember a specific night on the phone together talking about it's in Italy and it's not looking good and it's coming at us, get ready. And that was kind of the day that I was like, okay, engage. So one thing was just head down and do it. I learned something about myself with that, and I'll talk to you about that later. But the next thing, as we were doing it, as I was caring for these patients, was fear, right? You start to see the person in the bed and they're younger than you are. And man, you take that home, you're driving home during the day, you're do. And then you're driving home and a tear rolls down your eye. And, at that point I was sleeping in the basement. And by night I was reading as much as I could. I was creating document after document, trying to communicate what the next thing we were doing was, trying to keep everybody up to speed. I was actually living in this basement that I'm sitting in right now, trying to protect my family. So fear that my own mortality was a part of this. And we didn't know at that point whether I was in the high risk group or not, I remember this exact code. I vividly remember a code that's very similar to this one, if it's not this one. And I remember being in that room with, I think it was Dr. Baxter. Bram was outside the room on the phone with the family. Dr. Baxter and I and a team of nurses and RTs, which we minimized because we were worried about exposing too many people, especially in a code environment, to the virus, doing chest compressions, the third time, right? Trying to turn this patient around and achieve return of spontaneous circulation, right? But uncertainty was in my mind. Can we save this patient? If we save this patient, how many of my staff, the nurses, the RTs, the fellow that's sitting beside me, trying the same thing I'm doing, trying to figure out a way to bring this 45-year-old with kids back? Are we risking them? When do we stop? And it's still April 6th. We didn't have that much experience or knowledge. We didn't know whether this patient could survive. If we got to this point, all we had seen COVID myocarditis, and we knew that was a really bad sign. So uncertainty, and worrying about the people around you, worrying about their safety.
Joe, I know you so well, and I know how, for all of us really, but I know your family is everything. And the fear of bringing things home to your family, of your colleagues and your teams getting sick, that's huge. And that's another deep cut. Outside of the fear, just the patient's, the personal fear. Dr. Fettig, I'm going to come to you next. You, again, as a leader, you're looking at this big picture and seeing what's unfolding with these patients, with the enormous emotional toll. You're especially trained in palliative care to pick up on the emotions of the family, the patients, and honestly, us. I feel like you're one of my doctors. What's it like to be you on April 6th?
Oh, overwhelming. I think we were about a month into just go, 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 with the pandemic. I think that was probably about a month after that first conversation that I remember, that first weekend of starting to talk and plan. And I think that particular day, I remember running to the code. I didn't know the patient, but I think I heard the code overhead, and I knew that Dr. Willard was in her office on the phone with families. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go and see if there's any help that, is needed. And I was only there for a moment because I thought, oh my God, this surely isn't going well. And really, honestly, I think I was there for probably all of 2 minutes myself. And I was able to have a quick conversation with whoever was there and trust that what was happening was what was supposed to be happening at that moment. And that, if I was needed, I didn't have to lurch into action. And I think I sent a message to Claire and, just to make sure that she knew what was going on. And in that moment, actually, was a feeling of helplessness. I was thinking of, 15 other patients at the moment, but also one of deep trust and knowing working with many of the people for years. I think of the relationship over time with you, Graham, and Joe and Claire, and just knowing you guys. I'm a couple of years ahead of you guys. So I was on faculty when I remember you guys rotating with me as a resident, and over the years developing this relationship where we know each other so well and how we practice, and just trusting that process, and knowing the nurses, and knowing Chaplain House, and just what the next step, being able to anticipate what the next step. And if one of you says, we've got it under control, it's like, okay, even though it's bizarre for a feeling for a palliative care physician to walk away from the third code on a patient, to just trust that that's where we are, and that I can go on to the next patient that needs me. And so, but then also fear, just knowing, we know now that April 6th was starting to get to the peak, but we didn't know that we were getting to that peak then. And just like, the helpless feeling of, oh my God, are we going to get to May 1st and it's going to be 3 times as bad as what this is? Is the entire hospital going to be filled with people that are on ventilators with COVID from throughout the state? Where is this going? And so just fear, and like, Joe mentioned, I was sleeping in the guest room. It was very personal. I a year or two ago, had kind of a incidental finding with my heart that was of uncertain significance, and thinking, holy crap, if I get COVID, is that, uncertainty related to, I run, regularly, and this may be just an incidental finding of indeterminate significance, but if I get COVID, is that going to end my life? And so just the fear for myself as well, and my family, not wanting to take it home to my family. So lots of emotions going through my mind and my heart.
So we're just past the halfway point, and I would just want to circle us students in to recap. We've used a case, and what that case has enabled us to do is hear directly from the people involved of the emotions that they were going through: frustration, fear, overwhelming, helplessness, deep emotions that cut to the core of us as humans. We saw some of the ties that we would normally have, our relational ties, like Jesse talked to, were severed. Our ties with the patient's families were severed. And sometimes ties to our own family, staying in the basement, severed. So this is a tidal wave. Resilience And this is what FIRM is all about. Resilience is in the name. Resilience properly defined is your ability to stay straight. Think of a lighthouse. Think of a lighthouse with a big tidal wave coming and wave crushing against the lighthouse. Resilience is the ability of that lighthouse to stay strong, to stay lit, so that others, so the captains out at sea can find their way home. Resilience is the ability to adapt in the face of overwhelming stress. Resilience is not necessarily something you're born with. Maybe you can learn some resilience if you've seen it modeled by your mom who beat breast cancer, or a role model in your life who inspired you. Resilience is something also that we can learn and we can develop and grow. And in the opening comments, we started to get some inklings of how resilience works to grow us. And there are some themes that I started to see come out. And so in the back half of our talk tonight, and we may have a couple others join, Tony House, our chaplain, one of our interpreters, Sam Kay was one of our ICU nurses. She may join, but I can't see you guys. If you've joined, I can't see you, so just speak up. The back half of this, what we're going to do as a team here is I'm going to come back to the team, and rather than kind of call out each group specifically, the best thing, maybe I'll just kind of put you in groups, but we want to learn and we want to share what you've learned about yourself through all this. There are still some open wounds. I'm not saying that we're all better and put back together. You know, the lighthouse has been battered. Some shingles have fallen off. The light may not be as bright as it once was, but I know that we've learned some lessons from this that we can impart upon the next generations of students that are coming up to join our family. And so what have you learned about yourself? That's a key thing you'd like to share with this group. In no particular order, I'm going to start by putting them on the spot because they know I always do that too, and with my residents, with Willie and Sam. What have you learned? What have you guys learned about yourself through COVID that you'd like to share with the students here at FIRM tonight?
So one of the things that I've learned over the years is that I really, really, really benefit from writing. I'm not usually much of a journaler, but some of the most impactful patient experiences I've had over the years, and particularly several during COVID, I've written about with even and posted publicly, with anonymity, of course, given to the patients, but when I can write my feelings down and see it all on a page, I think it provides me some own validation with some of the challenge of feeling all those emotions. And then it's also helpful for my friends and family, those in and not in medicine, to look at it and validate the struggle as well. And I think one of the other things that I try to always focus on, I heard a mindfulness trick recently, which is using the phrase I get to do this thing. And so when I'm in the room and the patient's dying and the code's ongoing and I'm not sure what's going to happen, I remind myself that I get to do this. Not everyone's so lucky to be in a position of helping, and I get to do that.
So one of the biggest things that I realized is I really get my energy and like support and like resilience and stuff from the people around me. And that's really, I think that going through these experiences, like you can't describe these to anybody else. Once you experience them, you have to talk to other people around who have had the same experience, been there at the code with you or on the ICU team with you. Like those are the people who understand it best and you have to lean on. And I think doing things like we have these things called debriefings and stuff like that, because those people are there with you and like you can learn something from every, patient you help take care of and all of the codes you see and stuff like that. And learning, it is really important, like in every step of the medicine process, like from like when the patient gets into the hospital all the way to, are they being discharged home or are they going to be discharged, unfortunately not home? Realizing that you play such an important role and every single member of the team has played such an important role, and realize that like what Willie was touching on, like you get to do this every day. And that's like such a blessing. And you get to work with awesome teams and you get to like help, patients in their final moments or, help families get through really, really tough times.
Thank you, Sam. Next, I'm going to come to our nursing group. Alni, Amanda, Kara. What have you guys learned through this that you'd like to impart to our students?
Personally, for me, kind of like you mentioned, Dr. Carlos, adaptation. When they first told me that I would have 4 critically ill, unstable patients, whether they're paralyzed, prone, on continuous dialysis, I thought there was no way I could manage that. I really I couldn't imagine myself doing that. But I found that I'm stronger than I thought that I knew that I was. And that I can adapt to very challenging circumstances. So I feel like I've grown and I've become stronger because of that. And then another practice, kind of alongside what Willie was saying, which I love, something that my husband and I have been doing is just, in the times that seemed so helpless and so dark and coming home every day and just feeling defeated, something that we started practicing was just saying what we're thankful for. And so daily, just like, trying to think of something different of what am I grateful for today? Just that I can go into work, that I can walk, that I can breathe, just stating those things. It really is hard to feel as defeated when you are recognizing and acknowledging what you're thankful for. So that's something that kind of helped us a little bit.
I think, let's see. Okay. I think I learned the most was, I guess, figuring out our role in the ICU. It seems odd that it happened at that time, but the nurse practitioner role was new in the ICU, and then this happened, and you just kind of had to jump right in and figure out your place. So we worked really close with the residents and then the staff and fellows that came overnight as the more teams were there, and we just kind of figured out where we fit in the role and learned, like Kara was saying, how to adapt and knowing what to do, when to ask for help, when everything was too overwhelming. So I think it was a weird experience, not only from the sadness of like the COVID and how sick everybody was, but just the whole role itself being new and then having a pandemic thrown into this new role.
Amanda?
Yeah, what I learned, because there's just been so many different things, and several have already touched on it. One thing that I've already been doing for years with my kids every night is have them say something they're thankful for. So definitely continuing to be in the practice of being grateful. And then also just trying to encourage the staff and the team as much as I could. I was picking up shifts and also staffing, but in my charge nurse role, I don't, and that was kind of sometimes isolating itself as well. And it almost felt defeating at different times, not being able to be everywhere that I felt I should be in helping the nurses, and having to make assignments for nurses that I knew were going to be overwhelmed and feel that they couldn't do their jobs. So just learning how I could best manage resources, I could best manage time, how I could best support and encourage the team members, even just talking to the other nurses, like encouraging them to express their fears and frustrations and being able to talk about it right there in that situation a little bit, and letting them know we are in this together and it's okay. And is this what we're used to? Is this what our standard? No, but it's the best that we're doing, and we're going to continue to do the best that we have with what we have and what we're able to do, and just continuing to impart that, and continuing to impart that to people that are struggling.
Thank you, guys. Coming next to our palliative care, and we're so thankful to be joined by Tony House, who is our hospital chaplain. She had to join on late because she's doing so many patient care things. Chaplain House, asking you and Lyle and Claire to share something that you learned about yourself through this difficult case and the pandemic, really in general, that's built resilience in you. Something that this scene and this season has taught you. So feel free, any of you three, to go for it.
Okay, I'll go. So I feel like with the rocky course of these ICU patients and just how long they were there and the ups and downs, I think I probably said something along the lines of, we'll take it day by day with family. It felt like 1,000 times. And I think somewhere along the line that recognition of we can't take much for granted really sort of struck home for myself. And I feel like I'm much more appreciative of things and don't take for granted the simple things the way that I may have before all of this. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. And then just the simple fact of there were really awful days, and just being able to say that and to say, today I'm not okay. And a greater comfort with, saying today is a day that I need help, and that's okay.
So I have always been one to take my day and play it back through my head in kind of blow by blow, word by word, what did I say and what was the outcome? This won't come as a surprise for some people that know me maybe, but in a way where I really beat the hell out of myself. And, perhaps that served me well in some ways, to become a better communicator. But at times I'm have not been very kind to myself, I don't know, perhaps others can relate to this, like having a difficult conversation and really going back through and thinking, oh my God, what happened there, and why did things go awry, and blaming it on myself. Okay. And what the pandemic has forced me, and this actually was one of the things that led me to actually go to therapy a couple of years ago for a while. And it was really helpful. I actually did acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a form of cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the principles there is to live out your values fiercely and accept anxiety as that's a natural byproduct when you value something really deeply. And just because you experience that anxiety doesn't mean that it can be kind of, it's painful, but it's in some ways the anxiety, it's just a byproduct. And that if I can work towards something that I deeply value, that the perfection as I work towards that value, that perfection is impossible. And I felt that time and time again. When I went to hospital leadership and said, we need an iPad in every single room so that people can communicate with their families. And they looked at me and said, you're crazy. I mean, they didn't literally say I'm crazy, but it was like, we can't do that, Lyle. And I learned that, okay, what was the value there? I wanted people to stay in touch with their family, right? And so, they can say whatever they want about me, but that value was deeply held. And just to be willing to speak my mind when I see something that I value, that, that it's probably a shared value for many of us, and to just work towards that, fearlessly as much as possible.
Tony House, are you on our call and able to unmute and join us? She's sending me a telepathic message, and it goes something like this. Love. Love is the word that it's taboo to talk about. Love is a word that just gets blown off for Valentine's Day cards. But love is a lot of what we're talking about. Love undergirds a lot of this. Love is the cure. Love wins. And I hope she does get a chance to join us. Otherwise, I'm going to keep my antennas, my Tony House antennas up, because I know that's what she wants to say. I'm going to come next to the lovers of the lungs. Speaking of love, Dr. Suazo and Smith and Jana, what did you guys learn about yourselves that's a piece of wisdom you want to share with this classes of medical students?
I would say probably the same as Kara. I really learned that I'm a lot stronger than I thought I ever could be, but that it's okay to not be. We all had a lot of really, really hard days, but I think luckily for the most part, we didn't all maybe have the same hard days. And that meant that there was always kind of someone there behind you, propping you up and helping push you through the next days. And that was really important, just being able to talk to each other, talk to my peers, talk to other people that were going through this. My husband, my family, they were amazing over the last year. I think we all had gotten a lot of support from our families and from the community. How many times were we fed? I mean, we never went without food ever. Taken care of, letters from children in elementary schools, all of those things, they kind of hit your heart on the days that you really needed it. But being able to talk to the people that were going through this together really made a big difference for me. So know your people, get close to your peers, know your team, take care of each other.
So I think from my standpoint, I learned two things about myself, or I guess in general. So one is the importance of relationships. I can't tell you how much stuff we went through, I guess, especially March, April, May, where I kind of spent those few months at Eskenazi. The folks that I worked with, I think the relationship that we made is different, compared to those that I have with other nurses, RTs, pharmacists, et cetera, just at other hospitals in general. As fellows, we rotate through 4 different hospitals, but every single time that I go back to Eskenazi, it's like I'm going back home and seeing everyone that's so familiar. You went through the same stuff together, so it just feels different. So I think it's that relationship that we made during difficult times has kind of created a stronger bond, I guess, as cheesy as it sounds to say. But the importance of relationships is a big one. And I think the second one that I learned is to be vulnerable. I think at least for myself, I was always kind of raised to try to make sure that everyone sees you in this, happy light, don't show any weaknesses, make sure that always kind of be even keel essentially. But easier said than done, and then working with guys like Dr. Smith and Dr. Carlos, where, we literally just had kind of therapy sessions on a daily basis, just to check in and see how we were doing. And I think that was so important, just to open up and be vulnerable with each other really changes everything, changes the whole dynamic. So strongly encourage for all you guys to have mentors and people that you can lean on during those difficult times, because, as much as you want to do it on your own, it's impossible, especially during times like this. So once again, that culture of appreciation is always there. So appreciate every single one of you guys.
So I have a few things to share. One is that this team, man, I mean, I was proud of Wishart back when I was at Wishart, and it certainly is my home. Call it what you will, Eskenazi, Wishard. But it's the beating heart is the people that work at that hospital, and a lot of them are here with us. But man, as a team, we achieved amazing things over the past year. And I think one thing that kept me going was looking back and pulling out those achievements, whether it was somebody that pulled them out for me or I pulled them out for the people around me. But sharing the positives of what we were doing. And then as we went through and through, looking back to see what we had done, and just it helps energize you to realize the team that's around you and the achievements that you're making. People and sharing and talking. Graham, Lyle, Claire, Roberto, you guys, I spoke to a lot. I can remember multiple times where Lyle and I would just run into each other in the hallway and just spill the beans on how we're feeling. You know, Graham, I think he and I have talked more times than any of the others, but man, those talks, no matter who they're with, just sharing how you're feeling is so important. And I think the most deeply personal thing that I can share with you guys is that, you call it vulnerability, call it finding your feelings and being honest with yourself. But there was a period of time where I was kind of in a fear crisis, and I wasn't afraid of dying myself. I was afraid of dying for my family. And I went home one night, and it kind of had built up. I had some tears and some tears and some tears. One night I went home and I wrote 3 letters, one to each of my daughters and one to my wife. And that night, after I finished those letters, I went up and I talked to my wife, and I cried and cried. But that day put me in a much better position, because I knew that what I was supposed to be doing was what I was doing every day. And I accepted that feeling, that fear in my heart. And I told my family I loved them. I told them that this was the right thing for me to be doing. And I dove back in. And that was everything for me. So sharing and being honest with yourself, being honest with the people you love is so important.
Oh, thank you, Joe. That is so powerful to hear from all of you. Before we turn it to our students panel, other thoughts, maybe something that struck you that somebody else said, or something on your heart that you're like just burning. It's an itch. It's down deep right now, and you're like, should I say it? Should I not? I don't know what to do. If there's something else on your heart that you want to say, please do. Now's the time.
Please skipped me, so I'm just kidding.
That was the humor part.
No, I obviously deal with everything by humor, which, is that healthy? I don't know. But I feel like, well, that's one of my roles, is I try to keep it light and encourage people and make somebody laugh. And that's one of the things that I do to just keep myself positive and going. And I think there was so much like negative going on, but trying to focus on being positive and grateful for stuff like, oh my gosh, I got to feel safe. All of you guys, you know, I mean, I came in occasionally during a lot of that time, but I was so grateful that I could do most of my job from home. I was super grateful to like the teams, you guys called me on the phone, drained your cell phone battery, kept me on speakerphone, and took me around the ICU so that I could help in any way that I could. So, I mean, that's just incredible. Somebody took me into the bathroom. I'm not going to say which fellow it was. It was not Roberto. I was like, hang up. But I was so grateful that my input was valued by the team enough to be able to call me on the phone and let me make recommendations, because honestly, without that, I would have been not effective, not able to do my job if I didn't hear those discussions and be able to interject in real time. So I was super, I guess, still grateful for that.
All right, now that the Queen has spoken, anybody else have anything to share? All right, students, I've been informed that you guys have the ability to unmute. And so this is your moment. I'd just like to hear those of you that have been engaged and listening, and I see some faces on my screen, and don't worry, I won't call you out, though I really want to. What are the themes that you guys kind of saw? What was it like just to hear from this group and see this team, and what are your takeaways going to be? Anybody, just try to stay muted if you're not talking, and be nice.
I can go first, just to break the ice, but a really big theme that I heard was gratitude. I heard it from almost every speaker in one way or another, practicing gratitude by yourself or with other people.
I thought it was interesting how I think a common theme too was the team interactions that all of you had, and those interpersonal connections, not feeling alone, and having people side by side next to you, going through the same emotions, same situations that the group was dealing with, and how that kind of contrasts to those of us that weren't in the trenches, as it were, where we were all avoiding social gatherings and being far apart from those people, and but also at the same time not being in the thick of things. So I think the contrast and getting a different perspective of it, at least on my side of things, has been really really impactful.
Hi. So I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, and I keep being reminded of, is the humanistic side of medicine, how it's important to have those connections with your patients, but not only your patients, but also the people around you, the people you work with. That makes the work meaningful. So.
Something that really stuck with me was the helplessness and then knowing your role. So I personally, as a second year, felt like I so wanted to be able to help, but then knowing that really my role right now is to be studying, to learn all these things. And I did learn a lot because of COVID, especially about the lungs and stuff like that, just doing research on my own time. But it helped me to understand it a little better, put things in context. So I think I studied even better because of this.
I learned that emotion's good, and it's good to show emotions because it leads to action, it leads to movement. And then when you show emotions with others, it leads to collective action and movement. That's really awesome.
Well, I'll definitely hang on for a little bit in case anybody wants to hang on and chat, but I want to just kind of wrap us up with kind of the take-home messages. I'm unable to talk to you about what makes you resilient. I can't put words on paper. I needed to show you faces. I needed you to hear stories. I need you to meet people. That's what makes us resilient. It's each other. And picture that lighthouse again with the wave coming on it. If that lighthouse has been tethered, and if you look closely at tall flagpoles, radio towers, when you're driving home, next time you see a cell tower, they're tethered. That's where the resilience comes from, because when it starts to lean and one of those tethers is starting to crack or to get bent, the other one pulls it back. We need our tethers, and your tethers are each other, your faith, your family, your friends, and believe it or not, your patients as well. Our students, your residents, your teams, your pharmacists, your nurses, your RTs, your chaplains, your interpreters, everybody you interact with, they're your tethers. And so just be mindful of that, be thankful for that. Check in, make sure that your tethers are tight, make sure that those people that are supporting you up are strong and being supported. The more tethers that you have, the stronger you're going to be. And so you got to meet my tethers here tonight, everybody here at Firm, and I'm so glad you did. I hope you're as moved as I am. I'm probably gonna, I'm like not a public crier because I'm like get anxious, but I'll probably just break down here in my office after this camera turns off, just with emotion and Thanksgiving for my team. So with that, I thank you guys. And again, I'll hang out for a little bit if anybody wants to hang and chat. Otherwise, if you guys would give a round of applause if you have your cameras on for our panel being here. I hope you all know from the bottom of my heart how much you mean to me, which is why I wanted you here with me tonight.